Everybody, I think we're at 9:30 here, so I think we'll get started if you guys don't mind. Thank you guys for coming this morning. My name is Bob Baumgart. I own a local business here called Homestead Senior Care. I also serve as the 2020 board chair for the Chamber of Commerce this year here. On behalf of the Waukee Chamber, I'd like to welcome all of you, members of the Chamber, residents of Waukee and the surrounding areas here to our February legislative coffee. We look forward to hearing from our local elected legislators and officials here, Senator Schneider and Representative Judge, on some of the state issues that they're following that they have kind of marked for this this agenda, and then we'll have some questions from the audience here that we'll kind of work our way around the room as those happen. So the Waukee Area Chamber of Commerce is made up of local businesses, organizations, and individuals dedicated to promoting growth and prosperity in the Waukee area. The Chamber Board leads 7 committees in which our programs of work fall under. The Government Affairs Committee serves as the legislative voice of the Chamber and hosts these coffees during session, stays up to date on legislative issues affecting businesses, and participates regionally in the public policy meetings and hosts the election year forum. So this is being put on by the Government Affairs Committee today, so thank you for that committee. I think we need to recognize a couple people in the room. We've got Mayor Clark here. There she is, Mayor Clark. Also with the city is City Administrator Tim Mormon back here. Thank you guys for everything you do for the city of Waukee. I think we need to recognize and thank Natasha. She's in the back, in the corner, running the monitors. She records this for us every single year, so you don't need to record it for yourselves. It'll be posted on our website, and all the questions, you'll be able to hear everything through the mics and such. So I think we should be good there. And I think there's a couple of chamber board members as well as our chamber president, Melinda Bain, that are here as well. There's a lot that goes on in the background to make these types of things happen, so I'd like to thank them for their participation as well for that. Well, thank you guys. Please join me today in giving a warm welcome to our speakers. We have State Senator Charles Schneider, State Representative Kenan Judge, and I think our order of business will be that we'll give each a chance to speak at what they're looking at, what they have earmarked for this session, introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of move to some questions, take questions for about an hour if we have, and then give them a chance to wrap up and be free and clear and out of here in a little over an hour or so, if that's all right with everyone. So maybe Senator Schneider, if you'd like to start.
Sure, and first of all, thank you to everyone who came here today. Thanks for coming and showing some interest in what's going on at the state level. Look forward to hearing your comments and questions. Thanks too to the Chamber for hosting this like you do every year. This is a great opportunity for me and for Kenan to get in front of people, our constituents, and know what's on their mind, bounce some things off of them to get their thoughts on issues that we're considering too. So thanks for coming. What I thought I'd do is start out by just giving an overall picture of what kind of the high-level priorities for the legislative session are going to be, and then talk about a couple of individual issues that I'm working on, and then turn it over to Kenan. So from a macro point of view, we're starting out with the year in a very solid budget position. We have about $1.2 billion in reserves and surplus. $800 million of that $1.2 billion is in our cash reserve and economic emergency fund. So those are stashed away to use if there's a downturn in the economy and we end up bringing in less revenue than what we project. And then the $400 million on top of that is just an operating surplus. It's more revenue than we expected to take in when we set our budget last year. One of the main issues this session is workforce. I think everyone here knows that we have a workforce issue in Iowa. Almost everyone I talk to from every part of the state in every kind of occupation and profession says that they need more workers. They need more people. And that's something that we want to try to address. It's something that we've been working on the last few years with Future Ready Iowa, putting more money aside for things like apprenticeships and skills training so that people can improve their skills to find a higher paying job if they want to, and so that there are more people in our labor force who are able to meet the higher skilled demands of today's economy. There are some other things beyond Future Ready Iowa that we can do, I think, in order to make Iowa a more attractive place for workers. One of them is continue to work on our tax rates. Many of you have heard me reference the Tax Foundation before. They come out every year with a ranking of states in terms of business tax competitiveness. Last year, I think Iowa ranked 46th. This year, we're now 42nd. That's an improvement that was brought on in large part because of the income tax bill that we passed 2 years ago. So things are moving in the right direction, but being 42nd out of 50 states is not competitive. So we need to continue to do what we can in order to make Iowa more competitive from a tax standpoint. Now, I know taxes aren't the only reasons why people decide to live or locate in a state, but that's one of the areas where we can be competitive. That's an area that we control. We're not going to control having nice weather year-round. We can't make mountains here. We can't move oceans here, but we can impact our tax rates directly. And the bottom line is we need to be better than 42nd out of the 50 states. Future Ready Iowa will continue to put more money into that for apprenticeships and job skills training. Occupational licensure is a challenge. Iowa is one of the states that requires more licensures for occupations than any other state in the country. Something like 25% of the jobs in our state require somebody to get a license before they can work in that occupation. And that's just not competitive either. We need to make it easier for people to show competency in a job and be able to get one and start a career on their own rather than having to go before a board to take a test and pay money to get effectively a permission slip saying that they can work in that chosen occupation. Now, some jobs, it's probably necessary that there be a licensure requirement. Jobs where there is a public safety or public health concern, those obviously someone ought to be able to show some level of competency before they can practice in that occupation. But there are some that arguably don't rise to that level. And what the governor has proposed that we do, and that we're taking a serious look at this year, is setting up a review board to review occupational licensure requirements every 5 years or so and decide whether or not it still makes sense to license that occupation, or if the requirements are too stringent or too strict, or if the fee is too high. We're also looking at recognizing occupational licensures from other states. So if someone moves here to Iowa from another state and they've already been licensed in the state they're coming from and have not had any kind of disciplinary action taken against them, we ought to be able to recognize them immediately. And that's something that we don't do right now. We still require them to take a test and pay a fee. And if we want to encourage people to come and be active in our workforce without putting barriers in front of them, this is something that makes sense for us to do, I think. Another thing that we can do is take a look at our welfare programs and make sure that they're working for Iowans, and specifically child care assistance. Right now, if someone is getting child care assistance benefits, they can do that until they make more than 145% of the federal poverty level. Once they hit that level, all those benefits are taken away. So what I hear from a lot of employers is that they have a lot of employees who won't take a job promotion, because if they do, they'll go above that 145% federal poverty level and lose all their benefits, and they'll be in a net loss position. There are people who won't take full-time paying positions because they'll make more than the federal poverty level, and that's not right. We ought to be able to reform this program so that people's benefits start to taper down as their incomes increase rather than just completely shut off. So there are several bills that are looking at how we can best do that. The governor has made some proposals as well. So that's something that we'll address. Another issue that we'll take a look at this year is the governor's Invest in Iowa Act, which he talked about in her Condition of the State address and which he recently introduced to the legislature. Her bill was filed last week. And this is something that I was hoping to get some input from people on, because what it does is increase sales tax by a penny. It also lowers income taxes and property taxes. So the net effect is a tax cut of $7 million. But, you know, I want to know what people think about that and whether or not they think that that's something that we ought to do. The revenue from the increased sales tax would go toward funding the Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreation Trust, which is something that a lot of people have been asking us to fund through a sales tax increase ever since the constitutional amendment was passed about 10 years ago. Some of the increased revenue would also go toward mental health, and that revenue that goes toward mental health is what would be used to buy down the current property tax levy that's used to fund mental health in our state. And some of that revenue would also go toward lowering income tax rates. So when you look, what does that mean for Iowa competitively? Well, if we increase the sales tax by 1 penny, the Tax Foundation says that our sales tax rank will move from 15th to 26th. So we'll be going down from 15th to 26th. Our income tax rank will increase from 42nd to 20th. So we'll improve to 20th. And our overall rank would move from 42nd to 35th. So again, I don't know what the future of this bill is. There are arguments on both sides. I'm interested in knowing what you all think about that. So if anyone would want to comment on that during the Q&A, I'd appreciate it, or send me an email to let me know what you think about it. As far as individual bills that I'll be working on, medical cannabis, again, is something that we need to continue to work on. Last year, we passed a bill that changed changed the cap for THC allowable in medical cannabis. We took away a percentage requirement and moved toward a milligram requirement, which really makes a lot more sense when you think about it, because when you take an ibuprofen, you know how many milligrams of ibuprofen are in each capsule. And when you take an aspirin, you know how many milligrams of aspirin are in that capsule. That's how, you know, we measure potency of things. And I think it makes sense that we move away from a percentage cap to something that measures it in milligrams. And another issue I'll be working on is consumable hemp-based CBD products. Kenan and I both met with several people who sell these products and have talked to us about some confusion among the law enforcement community as to whether or not these are actually legal to buy and sell. And we've all heard stories and seen news reports of people who have been actually arrested for selling these. There's a woman in Ankeny who was arrested for selling these out of a store a couple months ago. And these are products that have very low THC in them. It's impossible to get high off of them. And they've been approved by the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency. And what I'd like to do is see us provide some clarity around this so that our retailers and consumers have some certainty in this and know that they're not running the risk of being arrested. So those are some of the things that I'm working on. And again, I'd appreciate any input on these or and welcome any other questions you might have. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. It's very nice to see this room packed. And Bob, thank you for moderating and to the chamber. It's a pleasure to be here. And first thing I'd like to do is introduce my wife, Kathy.
Is your microphone on?
There you go.
That's exactly why I wanted to introduce Kathy, is because she, we just had our 37th anniversary this year, and so I appreciate her being here and for her support and allowing me to do this, because this is a big job that I enjoy very much, but she does have sacrifice in this too. So I want to tell you a little bit about why I'm doing this and why I'm starting my second year, and I even love it more now than I did when I first started. It's an opportunity for me to give back to this community I love and this state I love so much. So I'm not 100% sure what Charles was saying about the weather not being, can't attract people for weather. Because when I retired, I stayed here, Charles, and where some people move away. So we can attract people here. But I believe that, service is an important part of a person's career and life. So thanks for giving me the opportunity. I want to shift into a little bit about priorities, and then I'm going to dive into them a little bit too, a little deeper as we get into a couple. First priority, and these are not in any order, so please don't say this is the top priority, the fourth priority, is civility and compromise. I think it's very important, and after a year, I believe that I've proven that it works. If we go down there and work together, and we can get things done. And there's enough divisiveness in our country today that we need to show people that we can work together in Iowa, and I believe it's very important part of making things work. It's really a lot about being down there is listening to your constituents, but then having relationships that you can get things done. I'm going to give you a couple examples of that in a minute here. Public education is one that is very important to me. Personally, my kids all went through public education. I went through a public education system that prepared me for a good career in Iowa, and so that's important. Affordable and accessible health care is another area that I spend a lot of time working on several bills with my colleagues, and that includes mental health as well. And I'll talk a little deeper about that. And then economic growth, and this includes our children too. And Charles brought it up a little bit about child care, and I will too, because I think it's something we have to work on this year. But if we have the economy working in Iowa, where we can get to a 3 or 4% increase in economic growth, then the money's there to fund more of our programs without raising taxes. And public education's one of them. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about, I'm going to leave civility and compromise to the last, but I'm going to talk a little bit about public education. I co-signed a bill with my colleagues, and we'll be debating it tomorrow, or no, Monday, in the legislature, about a 3% increase in school funding. And, I've challenged our folks to say, hey, just don't talk about the dollars, talk about what those dollars will do. Because if people say, I want more money, what does that really mean? So it means class sizes, and we're very blessed. I want to back up here in Waukee. We have a great school system here. We're very blessed in great teachers, great community support, but this really also ties into the economic growth of our state. That that has to be this way all across the state. So class sizes, delaying technology, reducing opportunity for students, and then some teachers' pay. I mean, we're going to come to a teacher shortage. I've talked to a lot of teachers, and that they're not seeing the classes coming out of our colleges to hire. There's people are getting out of that business. Everybody deserves a raise every year, and that's part of that 3%. And that will help us with our economic growth. And you'll find out a lot of these things tie together. And I'm going to mention child care and the importance of it, that we address that this year, because I do believe that's an economic growth engine. We do have a shortage of workers in this state, and there's a lot of deserts, child care deserts in the state, that people don't have child care, so they can't go to work. And, I looked at some numbers. The average in Iowa is $859 to $1,315 a month for child care. A lot of times that is 20 to 25% of somebody's wages. So, and I totally agree with Charles. We have to look at this child care cliff. If you're at 145%, the poverty level, and then it falls off all of a sudden, there are people out there. Those are real stories. So I co-signed a bill. We'll be discussing this in both legislatures this year on different bills. There's several bills out there that would have grants to open facilities, Also helping small businesses, open facilities, partner, expand child care for them, expand the assistance program, that would be where that child care cliff is, and tax credits. So I think that's it's everything ties in really together to help our state. And then also, I want to talk about, and there's all kinds of things we can talk about health care, but mental health care, that's something that's very important to me and I'm passionate about. And I believe we can make some progress this year. And it really starts with having the professionals here. We have to set a climate in Iowa that makes people want to work here and come here to help us. I mean, we need more psychologists, psychiatric nurses, and clinical social workers. And we constantly need to be having our programs and places for them to work and giving them the reason to come here and not some other state. Des Moines University, I was really impressed that they are training all their doctors that go through their class, get them some mental health care. Everybody, not mental health care, mental health training. Everybody needs, everybody needs, this is all on all of our shoulders. This is something that we all need to be working on and thinking about. And then, but that comes with prioritizing funding. And then I believe in diagnosing and finding ways to diagnose mental health conditions earlier, because actually it can cost us more, and it comes in the form of substance abuse. It comes in the form of ruining people's lives where they really can't get out of the darkness. So I think any program we do needs to have early detention. So I want to talk about a little bit about bipartisanship and give you a couple examples that I'm proud of. And I think it's our job, Charles and I, to make sure that we're serving this district. And in order to do that, we have to communicate, and we have to be a team. And one area that is, as I talk to people, animal abuse is a big issue. It may not be on our 4 top areas that I'm talking about today, but Charles and I had 3 conversations this year about it. It passed the House. I think, I'm not going to speak for Charles in the Senate, but I think he'd tell you that he's working hard to get that bill passed over there this year. So, when you talk to real people about real issues, that's what this is supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about 2 people fighting over what's this, I have this idea, you have that idea. It's about getting things done. So that's what I enjoy very much so. So hopefully we can so over the summer, I'm talking specific names and phone numbers of people that I met. So when Charles says, hey, call us, come down is the nicest. I'd love to have you anybody come down there. If you're willing to come here and listen and ask questions, you should come down there and visit us there, because it's a real cool place to come, and we'd love to see you. Another area that I think that I'm very, very proud of, and we're looking at this in a bipartisan way, and our mobile home park. We had a investor group, a venture capitalist, come in here and buy right here in our backyard, right down the street, and there's a lot of people hurting there, and because their rents increased double, and a lot of people can't afford that, and they're in fixed incomes, and it's really taken. I can tell you story after story, devastating stories that people have had to move. People have, at 70 years old, are going back to work at McDonald's or other Walmart to get enough money to pay that. So we need to have their backs too, and we've spent countless hours this year to get a bill drafted that I believe it got filed in the Senate maybe yesterday or Friday, and it's going to get filed in the House hopefully Monday. And it's a group of bipartisan people that have come together that want to do what's right. And I've had countless conversations with Charles on this, and I think that's exactly what you want. The bill, we have to be very careful that we write legislation that can get passed. That's the point I'm trying to say. I mean, I can put all kinds of bills out there and satisfy people saying, hey, I'm out here fighting for you and I'm out here working for you, but if we can't get them passed, what good do they do? So I believe we can get something done, and it was very rewarding to me. This summer we had a 3-hour hearing at the Capitol that mobile home residents came in from all over the state. There was 38 mobile homes sold last year to these venture capitalists. And I want to back up just a short bit and say there's a lot of good operators in Iowa. There's a lot of great people that own their mobile home community and are doing it the right way. I talked to one that said, hey, you know, somebody's water heater breaks down, I give them the money for the water heater and they pay me back $5 a month. So I'm putting everybody into one category, but when you come in here and buy a park and you double somebody's rent, that's not right. So we started digging into the bills or into some of the protections, and rent is one, but there's a lot of things that mobile home communities don't have the same protections as a person that owns an apartment. Like there's a no-fault eviction, so I can go in and tell somebody to move immediately in the next few days. And just because I don't like them, or if I don't, I want to put my own place in there. And that's, or if I don't pay, if I missed a rent payment and are a little fallen short. So we have to have protection. They should have the same protection somebody has in an apartment, and we're working towards that. And I'm very confident, and this is going to take, I do have an overview of the bill here if anybody afterwards wants to see it, but that's something I think we can get past. There will be a lot of discussion, a lot of pushback, but I believe working together that we can get that done. I've talked to Charles on it a couple times. You need us both pulling on this bill, and so I think it's important. So I want to say thank you for allowing us to be here today, and if anybody has anything afterwards too, I'll be glad to stick around and answer any questions. So thank you.
Well, thank you both for your opening comments there, and I think Representative Judge, I think your comment of civility and compromise is perfect for this situation here. We've been able to host these things in a very informal process where we raise our hands and we come over with the mic. Please remember they are meant to be civil and engaging and educational, not debative or divisive. Also with that, the compromise portion, we do have a limited amount of time, so please try to keep those to one question, maybe a quick follow-up, and we can get through this entire room. We have 2 microphones, and we'll kind of go across the room back and forth, and we'll start right here if we will.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Marianne Mickelson. I'm a retired state employee and a substitute teacher for the past 10 years in West Des Moines. My concern is that I don't believe we really need to put any more money in education. What we need to do is reallocate the monies. By putting 3% in, the superintendent gets an 8.5% raise, teachers get barely 2%, and substitutes get nothing. We haven't had a pay raise in West Des Moines for over 4 years, but yet we have a sub shortage. We need teachers, we need teaching substitutes, not babysitters, teaching substitutes. My concern that I want to share with you is the teacher leadership and compensation grant. And I can only share some statistics for West Des Moines. I can't do it statewide other than the total number. In 2019, the state was allocated $160 million. And by the way, I'll leave these papers with you, Senator Schneider. So I do my homework. So it's over $160 million to this grant for teacher leaders. What I'm asking is to take that grant money, don't throw it away, use it, but reallocate the fundings. The way it was set up was that teacher leaders would be like 3 years and then they'd go back to the classroom. Instead, now they're middle managers. They're making more money and they're traveling, spending tons of money. In fact, I wish we could do an audit on them to see how much money spent on travel costs. We need to reallocate the funding this way. I look at classroom teachers. We need more. We need smaller classrooms. We need more special education teachers. We need social workers in the schools that deal with mental and behavioral issues. We need social workers to help start now. not dealing when they're adults. Start in the training process. I would like to see that money and all these other funds not increased in education, but to use it where it's needed. And it shouldn't be set in stone for life. We should be able to reallocate in those areas. With that, I'll leave you my homework and give that to Charles. Thank you very much. And also, wait, Precinct 219 or 211 in West Des Moines is not in favor of the sales tax raising. We've already had one raise. Let's not do it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne, for your comments. We have tried to loosen up the strings that go along with education funding over the last several years so that school districts aren't tied to using specific streams of revenue for purposes that they might not need. So, for example, if a school is getting money for buildings that it doesn't really need to use, then we've tried to make it easier for them to put that toward operating expenses or salaries or whatever they might want to use it for. And like Kenan, I did go to public schools growing up too. I went to public and private schools, both in grade school and in high school, and I do value the importance of public education. We do need strong, good public schools. And to that end, we've put $264 million in new funding into K-12 schools since we got the majority in 2016. We fully funded all of our promises for that, and we've also done it in a timely fashion. One of the biggest issues that school districts have with funding is if we don't provide the funding within 30 days of when the governor gives her or his, depending on who the governor is, condition of the state speech, because they have to certify their budgets by a certain date, so they need to know what that amount is. And sometimes in the past, a number's been given only for the actual funding to be less than what was promised. But what we've done is not only provide that number in time, but also fully fund everything that we said we would do. And even when we've had to deappropriate funding, we held K-12 funding harmless. So we have tried to prioritize that. We do understand that there is a need for more funding for behavioral health issues in our schools. That's why, as a part of the K-12 funding package that we're proposing this year, we're including a separate amount, $2.5 million, to be used just for behavioral health training for students and for therapeutic classrooms, so that we don't have to have classroom clears where everybody has to move out of a classroom just to try and calm one student down. So we think that by providing additional training to help de-escalate situations, providing therapeutic classrooms where kids can go and we can work on some issues with them, behavioral issues with them, that will better serve all students. And the other thing I'd say too is when there are issues with or questions about how districts use school funding, I think we've shown that we're going to hold school districts accountable. I mean, that's why Rob Taylor, when he was the state rep here, and I requested the state auditor to do an independent audit of the Waukee School District when all those questions were raised about the spending there. So when we do hear about issues, we are going to take action. And that's why I introduced a bill last year that got passed that also enhanced penalties and protections for whistleblowers, so that people like those who were let go in the Waukee School District are better protected when they do see red flags and they want to raise those red flags to HR or to anyone else who has oversight over that.
Hi there. First of all, I appreciate your service and you holding this forum. My name is Myra. I am a Gold Star widow. My children are in the West Des Moines school system. We live in Clive. Everything's a little bit messed up. I'll try to keep this brief, but this is really important to me to say. First of all, my husband and I spent some time in Korea. And as I learned about the history of the Korean War, I was talking to one of my friends and saying, this is amazing how much y'all have done in just a few short decades, really. Because I learned that everything had been just razed to the ground and decimated. And she said, well, when Korea was divided, North Korea got most of the physical resources. So we had to invest in the one resource we had, which was ourselves. And I think that history has shown what a good plan that was. The issue that brought me here today is also education. When my husband died and we went through that period of grief, the school system is one of the things that helped us keep moving forward, and we're very grateful to our school. I appreciate your comments. I do want to say that I don't think it's inappropriate that funding keep pace with inflation, which it has not in, for instance, the increase of 1.1% that you voted for. You know, when we say those big numbers, we kind of lose track of how they meet up with the actual needs in our classrooms. I do think that if we care better for our physical and mental health, there will be less pressure on our school systems. But in the meantime, we have to address the fact that there are children for whom the school system is a real lifeline, and that maintaining that lifeline is what is best for our state, not just for those individuals. It is what is best for our future labor force. That being said, our school is definitely feeling the impacts of lack of funding. Our teachers are like that final line of defense. They are being burned out. They're giving more than any resource should ever be required to give. They're not being managed like a precious resource that they should be. So I'm here to say we're feeling the impacts of decisions. We are paying attention. This is very important. And I do expect to see Iowans invest in themselves because we are our own best resources.
You know, I would love to speak to that too. You know, I think you bring up very valid points, because if you give somebody a good education, health care with mental health care, and a good paying job, you can be successful. So in a lot of instances, we have not kept up over the last 10 years, percentage-wise, because we have to keep up with inflation in our schools, public school systems. And as long as I'm elected, to me, I'll fight for that, and that should be the first bite out of the budget before anything else, and because it's our economic growth driver for 10 years from now. So keep your voice heard. I think teachers, I was in business my whole life and ran a big piece of business for Hy-Vee, and I want to tell you that in business you have to look out into the future, and you have to. We are going to have a real teacher shortage if we do not start paying them more and giving them increases. I talked to schools that they haven't had any increase because the funding's not been there to give them proper increase. So in wages, that's important that we do that. And it's important that we don't overfill their class sizes with 40 kids in them because they can't handle it. And these teachers are working hard, and we need to put our money, that should be the first bite out of the apple, period, in my opinion. So we will keep working for that and keep funding, and that's why I go back a lot of times and say we have to get this economy moving. We have to have more people coming into this state, and we need to have job. We need to see wages and jobs increase, or the wages in these jobs increase, so we have the economic growth we can afford it. Because when you have the size of growth that we have today, it's not enough to make sure that we get to where we want to go. So I appreciate you being in here, and I'm sorry for your loss as well.
Yeah, and I want to add on to what Kenan said too. I'm sorry for your loss, and thank you for your husband's service too. And Kenan's right. This should be the first bite of the apple, and it is every year. I mean, that's why our Iowa code says that within 30 days after the governor gives the condition of the state speech, we have to pass a bill stating what we're going to provide for K-12 funding. And we do that the best we can every year. And this year, the equivalent, the governor's proposed a 2.5% SSA increase. Our funding package equates to about 9.4 in total, or 2.4 in total, excuse me. And that's higher than inflation this year, which for the last several years has been around 2%. We do what we can every year. But there are a lot of demands on our dollars too. And it's not just K-12 schools that are asking for funds. It's the nursing homes who are asking for, tens of millions of dollars of rebasing every year. It's other healthcare facilities that are asking for more money for Medicaid funding that they can direct toward salaries for their staff who aren't getting paid enough. So there are a lot of competing demands that we have to meet, and we do our best to manage those among all the requests that we get.
Please, is it on? Please give us your name and your city, and keep it to a minute, please.
Bob Bernard from here in Waukee. My wife and I and my mother moved here in June, and some weeks ago I sent you both an email to give you my priorities. You both responded to that. I'm on your distribution list, so I'm going to continue contacting you back and forth. And I'll come down and see you there in the legislature. I'm going to talk to you about the 3/8 funding that we passed 10 years ago. 62% of us did. So I'm really delighted that our governor has put that in their budget for this year. And I support you passing that 3/8 cents. And I'm going to talk to you one subset of that, and that is the REAP money that's being proposed to take that of different funding source and put that into 3/8%. That's not what we voted for 10 years ago. So I want to keep that funding separately, that REAP money, out of the 3/8 cents and implement it as we proposed 10 years ago. 62% of us, as I said. And secondly, the other money that is being proposed, a 1% increase for mental health, do it. It's so important for us to improve our mental health in the state, and that'll also help with funding, take the money out of from local government, state taxes. Yes, and that'll be an asset for us too in the whole. So those are my functions I'm going to talk to you about here today, and I'll continue talking to you throughout the year. Thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for your feedback on that too. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Lori Martis. I live in Waukee. I had two things. The first is I would encourage you to not consider lowering taxes, mainly because I would say we do have all these funding priorities, and I think we're starving our schools. I think we are starving our mental health, and we need to spend that money elsewhere. The second is I have a question. I would like to understand what we are doing. Auditor Rob Sand has said that he's struggling to get the data that he needs to evaluate what's gone on with Medicaid privatization. Can you tell me what you're doing to get that data?
Well, Rob hasn't talked to me directly. I don't know what he's talking about in terms of what data he needs. If he wants to reach out to me, I'd be happy to work with him to get the information he's asking for. I just don't know what he's missing.
Lori, he has not talked to me specifically either, but I do think the overarching problem with our Medicaid program is that we don't have the transparency we need to get the services and take care of people in our state that are most vulnerable. So we need to make sure that we take a look at that program, and before it implodes on itself, we need to make sure that we have some transparency. And I'm not aware of any bills this year that are being to address that. Maybe Charles is, but we need to find out why people are not getting paid, why services are denied. A lot of times, I've had 2 or 3 times this year where people have had to call me to say, hey, Kenan, would you help me get these answers to these questions? So I think everybody should be held accountable. So I know Rob has not come to me, and obviously not to Charles, but to get the data he needs. And I think what he's talking about is what is our savings between health, what did we spend when the state ran it, what did it spend when the MCOs have it. So it's a big, complex problem that needs people working together, not just throwing stones at each other. And we need to come up with a common solution that'll work in Iowa. And I'm not saying it needs to go back to state run or it needs to stay away from the insurance side. We just need to come up and make sure we have some transparency so we can see what's exactly going on in a reporting system. If somebody's not getting taken care of, if I have a healthcare system here, home nurses, 24-hour care that is going out and borrowing money to pay employees because they haven't gotten paid, I mean, that's not right. So it's a big, complex problem that needs bipartisan people sitting down, working together, just like we did on this mobile home park and throwing it out on a table. What can we do instead of throwing stones at each other?
And
Schneider, what data are you looking at?
well, I haven't, you're asking about Rob Sand specific data. I mean, I'll agree with Kenan that the managed care system is not yet where it needs to be. And I still get complaints from people who are having issue getting claims processed, providers, and individuals who are just having issues, and that's unacceptable. And this needs to work a lot more smoothly than it is right now. And I'm going to continue to do what I can to make sure that it works the way it's intended. So I'm willing to work on a bipartisan basis to do that. I think people need to be held accountable when that doesn't happen, and we need to make sure that this is working for Iowans.
Good morning. I'm Steve Herwig. I live on the West Des Moines side of Waukee. And three things that I want to point out that I think will affect the population in Iowa. One is the minimum wage, because there have been some municipalities or counties that tried to raise the minimum wage, knowing that they needed that to attract workers to their jurisdiction. And the state legislature said, no, you can't do that independently. So we remain at $7.25 per hour. These are what our neighboring states pay as minimum wage. Nebraska, $9, Illinois, $8.25, and Minnesota, $9.86. So I think the minimum wage is one factor. And when we talk about 2.6 unemployment, you have people working jobs at minimum wage. That's not a living wage. So that's a factor. Second factor, because we've curtailed immigration, you either increase population by people moving into the state through immigration from other states, immigration from people outside the country, or you increase the birth rate. And the birth rate is going to be, to some degree, affected by child care, because the more children you have, because in many houses, both parents are working. So if you don't have child care, they're going to be thinking about their family size if they know they're going to have to pay these extraordinary child care fees. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on immigration, and I wish there were more we could do at the state level to bring people here from other countries. That's largely a federal issue, as you know, and we do need federal immigration reform. We definitely need it, and I wish Congress would get together and figure something out. In the meantime, as far as immigration goes, one thing we can do is do a better job of integrating immigrants and refugees into the workforce, and part of that goes along with occupational licensing reform. I mean, I hear so many stories about what's called brain waste, where someone comes over here from another country, they're able to practice medicine or practice law or teach, or they're an electrician in their home country, but they're flipping burgers at McDonald's or Burger King because it's too difficult for them to get the credentials they need here to do the same thing, and that's ridiculous. And I applaud the Des Moines Partnership for a lot of the efforts they've put toward making it easier for refugees and immigrants to get acclimated here and get into the workforce. And to the extent we can help that with occupational licensing reform specifically, that's something that we need to do at the state level too.
Great points, Steve. I think it's very important. You talk about a livable wage, is that we do some things right. I mean, I think this, how we're investing in community college to give people the skills and the trades is exactly what we need to do. We need to put some of this into high school too, because we have to have people, if 35% of the kids coming out of high school don't go on to college, they need training or they're going to be stuck in low wage jobs. So I'm disheartened that our wages have not kept up. I'm not talking minimum wage, I'm talking about our low unemployment, Because I know if we can pay workers and get workers making money where they don't have to have 2 jobs, and it's happening right here in our community, then that's going to help our economy. And to your point on child care and immigration, absolutely, we're all immigrants. I mean, and we need to be welcoming to everybody, no matter what, who they are. And that's just common courtesy, and that's being an Iowan. On child care, you brought up a good point, one I didn't think about. You have 71% of workers, families, dual incomes to make it. And that's a great point. So I think that's what's nice about these forums is we get a different look at what's exactly going on, and it leads to bigger conversations.
Thank you very much. I'm Brenna Corona. I'm from West Des Moines, and I'm on your emails, like with both of you. I want to address, there's lots of topics in here, but I'll email you about them later. I'm concerned about, I read Senator Schneider's email about newsletter about helping folks get back into the working force. And the issue of, and we're all talking about it, is childcare and the expense. And I know I sent you a reply, Senator Schneider, but I'm concerned about working with groups like United Way of Central Iowa. I don't see a connection there. I would rather have you, talk to maybe Drake University Education Department. They started Head Start, talking with independent child care facilities to get some intake on that. And also I'd like to point out that Farm Bureau and Principal Corps, I think both of them, I knew Farm Bureau does and has maintained a child care facility for their employees, and I think we can get a lot of information from them. I also want to point out Representative Kenan had mentioned in some of his newsletter that there are grants available to maybe develop new child care facilities. And I really think that that's something that maybe we should be looking at, because if we help develop and grow those child care facilities to help out working parents, we're going to employ people and give them jobs working in the child care. And then, we also need to license them. And I'd like to talk about that later on with you, coming from out of state and having to deal with licensure. So really, just, I can talk to you later about this or email you or whatever. But those are my concerns, is this child care. And I really appreciate both of you wanting to serve our community and deal with these issues, because they are important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenna. I saw your reply on my newsletter, and I'm glad you're here. The reason I mentioned United Way in my newsletter isn't because that's not the resource I'm looking at for providing childcare. I mentioned United Way because they have highlighted this as an issue that needs to be addressed for people who are, struggling and trying to grow their salaries and move into better jobs. So that's why I mentioned United Way, because they're a big advocate for making these changes too. And I do, let's follow up too. I'm really interested in hearing what your personal experience is with licensure coming here from out of state.
Thank you. Mike Kern from Waukee. Just some general statements regarding your revenue shifting from property tax to income tax over to sales. Moving that from 42nd to 20th, that sounds good. You did address that you're going to use some of those funds for mental health. It just doesn't sound like that's going to be a net. Yes, some of those funds would be used, but we're still 49th in reimbursement rates. So if we need to get that moved up as much as possible. As far as across-the-board decrease in state income tax rates or property tax rates, I think we'd be better more looking at making credits for low income, maybe having a property tax as a senior exemption, something of that nature, if we make some compromise there.
Thanks for your comments, Mike. Property taxes are, when I was door knocking this I've been door knocking since last summer, and the top comment I've heard about from people on is property taxes. And there are a lot of seniors in particular who are fearful that they're going to be taxed out of their homes because property taxes have been an increasing burden on everybody, and it really impacts those who are living on fixed incomes. The reimbursement rate you're talking about, I think, is for Medicare, and that's a federal issue. So that's nothing we can do anything about at the state level, unfortunately. But that overall formula needs to be addressed. I mean, it works perversely. The better you do, the less money you get. So, and that's something that I know Senator Grassley's talked about quite a bit before, as have others in our congressional delegation. But thanks for your feedback too on
Correct on that. You are correct about that reimbursement.
yeah, and thank you for the comments and the feedback on the governor's tax proposal.
Thanks, Mike. I think it's going to take a lot of feedback, and that's why we're down there 100 days. I mean, this is a big decision that's going to get made. Are we going to go to are we going to up 1 cent sales tax? Are we going to cut taxes? I mean, that's going to have a lot of debate, and it should. Property taxes are an issue you hear a lot about. So I heard it as I was out talking to people too, and I think it's something that when you hear it as much as I did, you have to make sure that you're listening. So property taxes is something that people are very concerned about in our state. So we have to be very careful, though, that this is that we have the funds at the end of the day that we can fund our programs properly. So that's why we're down there. Your voices are heard, and I think it's important to stay in touch.
Dave Dykstra, Windsor Heights. Any thoughts in setting SSA increases for more than just 1 year, like for setting it for multiple years, like this year and next year at one time?
That has happened in the past. It's just hard to know really with a degree of certainty what's going to happen 1 year from now with the budget. So that's why we've moved toward doing it for the current year. Now that means that we've got to do it timely. We got to make sure that we're doing it timely because schools are relying on that amount of money when they certify their budgets. And if we don't give them something to use to certify their budgets, then that's going to force them to scramble or guess, and that's just not good government. So maybe someday we'll go back to trying to do it for a year in advance. It's just hard to do that with any degree of predictability or with as much as we'd like to have.
I think that's a good point, Charles. I think we got to really be careful looking forward too, because we're depending on this farm economy for a lot of our revenue. So what does 2021 really look like? And that's why I keep maintaining, and one of the top priorities is economic growth has to be in the forefront of everything we're talking about, so that we have the funds that we can handle. So that's something I'm looking at least.
Good morning, Senator Schneider and Representative Judge. Thank you truly for the work that you're doing at the Capitol. I want you to know that we see you and we appreciate the work that you're doing. My name is Mary Neubauer. For geographical purposes, I live 1 block from Waukee in the city of Clive. Thank you for asking about the Invest in Iowa Act. My husband Larry and I are big proponents of the Invest in Iowa Act. We as a state have been struggling for years to come up with an answer for funding for natural resources programs. And from our perspective, the importance of the Invest in Iowa Act is the money that would be allocated to mental health care here in Iowa. I appreciate that program because it leaves in place local funding so that it provides both state funding and local funding, gives everybody skin in the game in terms of making sure that mental health care is developed and is working well here in Iowa. It also is a net increase in mental health care, which I think is so important. So I appreciate you asking about it. I would love to hear what both of your thoughts are on the Invest in Iowa Act, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary, and thanks to both you and Larry for being such strong advocates for mental health. I've learned a lot from both of you over the last several years, and I thank you for all you do. I'm still getting feedback on the Invest in Iowa Act, and I want to see a net tax reduction, and I want to be certain that there'll be a net tax reduction for everybody. As far as the mental health component of it goes, I like having some kind of state and local match too. I'd also, be fine considering providing just state money for it. But if we move in that direction, then I want to make certain that we've got a sustainable source and that we know that there's going to be sufficient funding there, and that the local regions are going to be able to have the input they need in order to decide what services to provide that are in the best interest of their communities. Right now, just as kind of a primer, some people may not know this, but mental funding right now is completely paid for by property tax dollars. And that's a system that's been in place for a couple of decades now. And property tax levies vary across counties and across the different mental health regions, depending on what the need is for mental health and what arrangement they've worked out with the other counties that are in their regions. What Governor Reynolds' proposal would do is cap the mental health levy at $12.50 across every county, and then use general fund dollars through this increased sales tax revenue to pay for the balance of it among each of the different regions. So that's where the property tax reduction comes into effect, and that will mean different things for different people depending on where they live and on what their counties are currently levying for mental health dollars. So I appreciate your feedback on that, and like I said, I'm still trying to get as much feedback as I can from people too. We've received the governor's bill. We haven't received the runs from the Department of Revenue or from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau yet to know exactly what the dollar impacts will be. So that'll be an important piece of information for us as we look at this.
Thanks, Mary, for your question. And mental health is very important. And I think we have to have net increases in funding, because if we just switch pots today and we pay for it out of property taxes one day and out of sales tax the next day, we're really not where we need to be in the funding stream. So that's one thing that I'm going to be looking at very closely, and would appreciate your feedback, as I know you guys will be up there. I think it's important for us to hear from constituents. I'm like Charles, I've not made a decision on that. That's a big decision to make, and a lot of it is what's in the details of it. Where are the tax cuts going to go? I mean, we have to make sure that, the people that are not median income workers and low-income workers are getting the same type of tax breaks too. And so there's a lot to work out in that tax bill. And any time that you raise a penny of sales tax, it should be a lot of work. And we should be really thinking it through. But I know that mental health will be one of those areas that I judge on if we're going to vote on it as well. And the property tax decrease, I think I have to listen to that. I think that's a real thing. It's not something made up. So appreciate your feedback.
Ted Omart from West Des Moines. Is this on? Okay. I got a couple things. I could probably have 6 or 8, but we don't have time for all of those. But I want to touch briefly on the education part of it. And when it comes to classroom teachers, and the major problem that I've heard and why teachers are leaving the profession is because of classroom discipline and the lack of administrative support, that they have to deal with these unruly children over and over, and they keep sending them back to their class, or you deal with it, it's your problem, take care of it. They haven't had they weren't trained to be disciplinarians. They're trained to be teachers, okay? They're trying to teach kids to learn. And in the environment that a lot of these classrooms have, this whole thing of clearing a classroom for one child, why don't they just clear that one child out and do something with the school as far as discipline and unruly children, rather than forcing these teachers to leave, because there's just not a good environment to teach. I'll skip down to the property tax versus the sales tax thing, Charles, and you know that government needs a stable valuation, and that's what property tax gives you for a revenue flow. You need to know what your revenue flow is going to go. If there's a recession, okay, the sales tax is going to be affected, and you know, if there's a real recession, your income flow is going to decrease drastically. Okay, if you have property tax, that valuation stays the same, and so you have stable income. You know what your revenue is going to be, and you can plan on it that way. So I don't know that switching from property tax to sales tax is the answer. It's great when the economy's good, but if we have a slump in the economy, the revenue to the state through sales tax is going to diminish greatly. And as far as seniors, consider maybe, because the property taxes continue to go up and up and up, a lot of that, there's two parts of that, okay? It's the levy and it's also the valuation of the home. Maybe if you could freeze the valuation at age 65 for people, that would help stabilize what their taxes are, and they wouldn't be able to get taxed out of their homes. Thank you.
You got some applause there, Ted. You could run for city council again. Ted and I served on the West Des Moines City Council together for several years, sat right next to each other on the dais. Thanks for coming, Ted. And yeah, you made some really valid points there, I think. There has been we struggle to get teachers nationally. I mean, that's a national trend going on. If you talk to anyone, any school district administrator, they'll tell you that. Teachers will tell you that. And I can't help but to think that part of the reason probably is because the people coming through school today see how teachers are put in positions where they're dealing with disruptive kids. And what we've tried to do in our education bill this year is help train teachers to deal with situations like that, give them more liability protections so they don't fear that they're not going to be able to react appropriately given the behavioral issue that they're trying to address, and work on these therapeutic classrooms so that children with serious behavioral issues have a place to go outside of the general population, and the school district can work with those kids more individually so that they're not disrupting the educational experience for the general education population. The freezing valuation suggestion, yeah, that's an issue that's been suggested before, and I think that's worth taking a look at. I think the thing that we'd have to be careful about is doing that in a way that doesn't disrupt the market value of homes for people surrounding the home for which the valuation has been frozen. So that's something to keep in mind, but I think that's certainly something worth looking at.
Sherry Harberts from Waukee, and I live in the Midwest Mobile Home Court. Since this all occurred, I've done a lot of research, and I learned the low-income funds that are either given to the state or they're federally. I'm not exactly clear on that. There is the Dallas County Trust Fund that I learned of, and I find that in the mobile home community, selling manufactured homes, or once you're in the homes, there is definitely a discrimination of those. Well, the Dallas County Trust Fund, I learned that if I, as a single person, made less than $70,000, I could apply for a loan to do this if I needed a roof, anything that was code siding. I could apply for an application, and I could get up to $10,000 for a loan, no interest. However, because of the way mobile homes are designed, you cannot put loans on them. So the money is donated both by the state or federal, as I said, and then they go out to the banks and get more money. Polk County gets about $1 million. My point is that if we cannot have a loan on our home, then the money should somehow there be able to do a grant. I personally can't afford. I can afford to upkeep my home, but I doubt how many people, even as seniors, even know that is even available, because I just stumbled upon it. So I'd like to see somehow the state, came up with a grant for people who can't, because obviously people need to upkeep their home, and we don't have the luxury, if they bought their home recently, when the interest rates drop and you can refinance your home. We do not have that option. So that's something I would love to see you look into. And I have one other comment follow-up to with the mental health. If the sales tax goes up, that probably is only available for people with low income. I'd like to see, mental health is not only mental health, but / as a life coach, mentor. I see that as a positive thing for everyone in this room, not necessarily just because I would be having problems. I just don't understand why that you couldn't just write that off our taxes to make us better people in general. So, I mean, it's not, most companies, I can speak for myself, do not really have that great coverage for that. It's not like the same medical care that I can get. So, I mean, that's really wrong in this world.
Thanks, Sherry, for your comments. I know we've exchanged emails, I know, about the Dallas County Trust Fund and making resources available from that for mobile homes. I'll continue to look into that. I know we've looked into some information. I can't remember. I just have to look through my email chain with you to see where we left that.
I have some copies of what, the information itself I brought today.
Oh, okay. Can you leave that with me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have copies for both you and Kenan.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry, and appreciate all your feedback and all the help you've given us on this legislation. So, and being at our forums, one way I think we need to start looking at mobile homes is manufactured housing. Is we need more of them because it's affordable housing. And it's something that we're really hurting on in this state. Our housing stock is deteriorating all across the state, and especially in small rural communities. So if you look at these mobile, I just see one being built over in Iowa City. They're putting in this huge manufactured home. These are nice homes, and they're affordable for people that they can go in and have their own home. So I think that we need to expand, not contract ideas like you have on grants, on making sure low interest loans. I think it makes a lot of sense what you're talking about. So it's something I'll be working on, because I think if we tie affordable housing back to our economic growth, we'll go in, let's take a small community like I was from. The housing stock there is deteriorated in a lot of ways. So how are you going to get a teacher to go into that community that they can't, they're not making the same amount of money they can up here, and we expect them to come down, and we have to have housing for them. So I think it's a big economic growth challenge, and I think this bill will go a long ways in helping our state to be able to expand.
The other thing that when we were at that forum, there was a lady who was a realtor who attended the legislations at the Capitol in December, and I'm guessing she manages a couple mobile home parks.
Right.
And she suggested that the cities, that in the legislation, the cities take over the infrastructure in these parks, because as where I'm from, my grandfather built a park, and currently, it's still in the family. Well, those parks were like built in the 75s and 80s. And the infrastructure, the water, it's very expensive, that mom and pop can't afford that. And because it's private, they don't have the funding. And so what is happening? That's why kind of some of these parks are being bought to, investors that have big pockets and go to Fannie Mae and do all that stuff. So, really, in front of my street, I'm no different than anybody else who lives in Waukee, or anyone that lives in a house, except for my parents didn't feel, I mean, we sell them too. We didn't feel that, you know, I have to be defined by a $500,000 house and have a mortgage I can't afford. And I think that's the problem with some people look at mobile home parks and that in that respect. They honestly probably would rather just see them disappear.
Thank you, Sherry. I think that's a great valid point, and we need to expand that, not contract it.
Or just to let everybody knows, we're almost out of time here, so let's try to make any questions succinct and so we can move through.
Hi, I want to thank you both for your service. My name is Mary Kay Brinkman. I live here in Waukee. I'm a dental hygienist, and I really align with a lot of the things you're talking about today. I want to just want us to remember that oral health is part of overall health. The mouth is part of the body. Tooth decay is the most common chronic disease, even though for children, even though it's preventable. So I want to remember that when we're talking about health care, and mental health is super important, but so is oral health. It fits right into the healthcare system, talks about workforce, our lack of providers who take Medicaid. We also need to have kids healthy in order to be able to be well behaved in school. If their mouth is hurting them, they're not going to be, they're going to be a discipline problem in school, even though oral health is preventable. So I just wanted to bring that point up today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm cavity-free still, by the way, just so you know. And yet, because I had fluoride in my water and because my parents didn't let me eat sugary cereals, I think.
That's a great point, Mary Kay, because I've just read some statistics on bacteria and how it's cause of death because of oral health. So it's a great reminder for us to be thinking about.
David Leonard, Waukee. Charles, what became of the animal protection bill last year? I've heard that it passed the House. I've heard that you pulled it at the Senate. I don't know if that's true or not, but if you did, why did you? And is there anything specifically in that bill about puppy mills?
So the bill last year passed the House unanimously, wasn't it, Kenan? Or was there one or two
There
votes
was like
against it?
3 no's.
Okay, close to unanimously. I don't know where you heard that I pulled the bill. I did not. So wherever you're hearing that, it's not accurate. I wanted the bill to pass. I will vote for it in its current form, and that's what I've been asking our majority leader to do, to call the bill up so that we can vote on it. And I'll vote for it as is. I want to see the thing pass. As far as puppy mills, I don't think it has anything in, I'll have to double check. I don't think it has anything in there about puppy mills. What it does is addresses domestic pet abuse and torture and neglect. Right now, our penalties are very weak on people who neglect and abuse, torture animals. The criteria for determining whether someone has met the threshold of abuse or torture or neglect is very hazy and vague. It needs to be more definitive, and that's where the bill that passed the House helps. It sets some specific criteria that can be used to determine whether or not someone has abused, neglected, or tortured an animal. It enhances penalties for it, and those are all important things that we need to do, and we need to do it as soon as possible.
I think we have time for one more question, if there's one right here. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a cold today, so a bad cold. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Senator Schneider and Representative Judge. My name is Tanya Schramm. I live in Waukee. And my question today doesn't have to do with economics, which I think it's great that we're all talking about economic issues, but one of the things, I'm a lifelong Iowan, one of the things I've loved about living in this state my whole life is our commitment to civil rights. And it seems like over the past few years, that hasn't been necessarily as much of a priority for our legislature. So I wasn't surprised to see several pieces of legislation, ooh, I'm out of breath, aiming to infringe upon the civil rights of our LGBTQIA neighbors, our friends, and members of our families. I have family members who identify as LGBTQIA. They don't live in Iowa. Part of the reason they won't live here is because of the way that their civil rights are not being protected. In particular, I was appalled to see yet another attempt to condone discrimination under the guise of religious freedom. Now, I'm a person of faith. I'm a Lutheran Christian. I just finished school to become a pastor. So I really believe strongly in faith and living out our faith in our daily lives. But I don't believe that a person's faith tradition or set of religious beliefs should allow them to discriminate against another person. The freedom of religion does not include the freedom to violate another person's civil rights. One example of a bill right now is Senate File 508, legislation known as an RFRA, a so-called religious exemption bill. This legislation would allow for discrimination in the state based on religious beliefs and would gravely harm Iowa's strong civil rights laws. My question for you guys is this. If we start to allow discrimination based on religious beliefs, where does it stop? Where does it stop? When do we stop? I guess, where does it stop? Does it stop at a person's sexual orientation and gender identity? Does it stop with another person's religious beliefs? Does it stop with a person, the color of a person's skin? So where do you stand on legislation like the ones that are in the legislature now and in the future? Thank you so much for taking my question.
You want to start or you want?
No,
I
no.
can.
That's a big one to end.
Thanks for the question, and I'm glad you brought it up. I have not sponsored any of those bills. I do not support those bills. I'm a believer in civil rights and equal protection. I was the only Republican to vote in favor of including gender identity in our hate crime statute, and I got some heat for that, but I'm glad I took that vote, and I'll take it again. So, you're welcome.
Thank you, Charles. I will tell you this, that I will stand with people no matter what their color is, their religion, if they're the LGBTQ community, and I will not only stand with them, I'll fight for them. And I'll stand there, I'll advocate, and we have absolutely no room in our state legislature to be having these conversations. And I will not and I'm a faith-filled person as well, but I always go back to this quote, don't tell me about your faith, show me how you treat other people, and I'll tell you what your faith is. So thank you for that question.
Also, I don't see any of those bills advancing this year, just so you know.
So why do we waste time on bringing them up? I mean, we have so many, seriously, we have so many issues in this state that we're talking about really big, robust issues. We've seen so many of them this morning. Why in the world are we wasting time and energy bringing those pieces of legislation up?
We have 150 legislators. They all have different personal priorities, and any legislator can file a bill about anything. And just because it's filed doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere. And I don't see these going anywhere.
And I think that's why it's so important to come to these, to talk to your representative officials, to make sure they're representing you. No matter if you're Republican or Democrat, it really doesn't matter. Are they representing your views and your thoughts? And I can tell you those bills would not represent the thoughts of people in this district by and large. So I, along with Charles, don't see him going anywhere. I don't even think that there's no room for that type of conversation in that State House.
Well, thank you guys both for your attendance today, your willingness to commit some time out of your personal lives here on a Saturday to speak with everybody. I think maybe we should give them one last thank you. And I'd like to thank all of you here. You clearly brought very thoughtful and very compassionate statements and questions to everybody. That's what's led to success for these legislative coffees for so many years. I think that on behalf of the Waukee Chamber, with that, we'd like to thank everybody for coming and attending and look forward to next session, which I believe is April 4th, Saturday, April 4th. So thank you, and we'll close. Okay, there's one last statement.
Okay.
Okay, so I am going to come in. We do have 2 ribbon cuttings in Waukee this month. One is for Scooter's Coffee, which is right down the road here, on Friday, Valentine's Day at 11. And then Tommy's Car Wash is the 25th at noon. So if you're interested in shopping local, please consider doing that for your Valentine's gifts. And feel free to celebrate with us at some of these new Waukee businesses. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.